I remember that afternoon so clearly it might as well have been yesterday. The air carried the sharp, clean bite of early autumn, leaves just starting to turn gold and red along the riverbank, the kind of day that usually brought me nothing but quiet contentment. I was leaning against the weathered cedar fence that runs along the western edge of our property, the same fence my father helped me rebuild when I was barely 20. In my hands was my favorite chipped mug, steam rising from black coffee that had gone lukewarm while I watched them. Evan Brooks walked the perimeter with Emily, my only daughter, the light of my life. He had his arm lightly around her waist, in that casual, possessive way young men do when they think no one's really watching. Tall, broad-shouldered, hair the color of polished walnut. Always perfectly in place, even on a windy day like this. His smile flashed white and easy every time Emily laughed at something he said. He wore pressed khakis and a crisp button-down rolled at the sleeves. Nothing flashy, but everything about him looked deliberate, like he'd stepped out of a catalog titled Ideal Future Son-in-Law. They paused near the old split-rail section where the fence meets the pasture, and Evan turned toward me, raising a hand in greeting. "Mr. Harper," he called out, voice warm and respectful, the way he always did. "Just out of curiosity, does the property line run all the way down to that bend in the river? Or does it stop somewhere around the oak grove? I mean, it's such beautiful land. I was just wondering how far it actually goes." I gave him the same answer I'd given the first time he'd asked, a couple of weeks earlier during Sunday dinner. "It follows the river all the way to the bend, son. The oaks are still on our side. Been that way since my grandfather staked the claim back in the 30s. He nodded thoughtfully, as if committing it to memory. "Got it. Thanks, Mr. Harper. Really impressive how much acreage that covers." Emily beamed up at him, proud that her fiancé was taking an interest in the family place. I smiled back, raised my mug in a small salute, and watched them continue their stroll. At that moment, it felt harmless. Polite curiosity from a city boy trying to understand his future in-law's world. But then he asked again. 3 days later, we were all out by the barn after he'd helped me unload a few bales of hay. Another thoughtful gesture, sleeves rolled up, not a speck of dirt on him by the end. As we wiped our hands on old rags, he glanced toward the river and said, almost offhandedly, "You know, I've been thinking about what you said the other day. So the line really does go all the way to the bend? That's a lot of frontage." I felt the first faint prickle at the back of my neck. "Yes, Evan. All the way." He laughed lightly. "Sorry, I guess I'm just fascinated. It's so peaceful out here. Must be nice knowing exactly where everything begins and ends." I nodded, said something non-committal about how boundaries matter on a farm, and changed the subject to the weather. But the question had landed differently this time. It wasn't idle chatter anymore. The third time came over coffee on the porch the following weekend. Emily had run inside to grab cream, leaving the two of us alone for a moment. Evan leaned back in the rocking chair, looking out across the fields, and asked, exactly the same way, "Mr. Harper, forgive me for bringing it up again, but the property line, it really does extend right down to where the river curves, doesn't it? I keep picturing it in my head." I set my cup down slowly. My pulse hadn't quickened yet, but something inside me had shifted, like a gear clicking into place. "That's right," I said evenly. "Every inch of it." He smiled that perfect smile. "Amazing. Truly." By the fourth time, casually dropped during a walk after dinner, then the fifth a few days later when he just happened to mention it while admiring the view from the kitchen window, I wasn't smiling anymore. Not outwardly, Anyway, inside, a cold certainty was settling in, the kind that comes from decades of watching people, reading the land, and surviving more than a few hard lessons. I have lived long enough to know the difference between genuine interest and something else. Real curiosity fades after one or two answers. It doesn't circle back like a hawk riding thermals, waiting for the right moment to drop. Evan wasn't asking because he loved the farm. He was mapping, measuring, filing away details the way a surveyor does before drawing lines on a plat. And the more I watched him, the more that perfection started to feel rehearsed, too flawless. The hair never out of place, even after helping with chores. The manners impeccable, every please and thank you timed just right. The way he always knew the exact thing to say to make Emily glow, to make me feel included, to make my old friends at the feed store nod approvingly when they met him. He was polished to such a high shine that the light reflected off him instead of letting you see what lay underneath. People who are truly good don't need to try that hard to prove it. Flaws show, edges wear, but Evan Brooks had none I could spot. No awkward pauses, no unguarded moments, no hint of impatience or boredom. Just smooth, endless charm. That kind of perfection, I've learned the hard way, is usually the first and loudest warning sign. I didn't say anything to Emily. Not yet. I simply filed the questions away in the back of my mind, along with the growing list of small things that didn't quite add up. The way his eyes sometimes lingered on the horizon a beat too long. The casual mentions of future plans that always seemed to circle back to the land. The faint, almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw when I deflected his gentle probes about our finances or the farm's value. I stood there that crisp autumn afternoon, coffee gone cold in my hands, watching him walk away with my daughter on his arm. And for the first time in years, I felt the old protective instinct rise up sharp and clear. Something wasn't right, and whatever it was, I intended to find out before it could touch her. That night, the house felt smaller than usual. The kind of quiet that presses in on you after the day's work is done, and the only sounds left are the creak of old floorboards and the soft tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. I sat alone at the scarred oak table in the kitchen, the one Anna and I had bought at a flea market 30 years ago when we were young and broke and full of plans. A single lamp burned low beside me, its warm circle of light falling across the small framed photograph I kept there year-round. Anna's face looked back at me, younger than I remembered her in the last years, smiling that gentle, knowing smile she always saved for the mornings when the coffee was just right and the world hadn't yet demanded too much. 10 years since the cancer took her. 10 years of empty chairs and half the bed, of talking to her picture when the loneliness got too heavy to carry alone. I traced the edge of the frame with my thumb and let the memories rise like steam off the river at dawn. The farm had never been much to look at from the road. A modest 2-story house painted the faded gray of weathered barn boards, a red tin roof that sang under rain, fields that rolled easy toward the slow-moving river. People driving past probably saw just another aging family operation, struggling maybe, the way so many were these days. Old trucks in the drive, patched fences, me in the same pair of work boots I'd worn since the turn of the century. That was exactly how we wanted it. Beneath all that plainness lay the secret Anna and I had guarded for decades. It started back in the early 80s, a small lease on a corner of the back 40 that nobody thought much of. A quiet little oil play, Nothing dramatic, no gushers, just steady, modest production from a handful of wells tucked away behind the tree line where the land dips toward the river. Enough to keep the mortgage paid, the equipment running, the college fund for Emily growing without ever needing to touch principal. Enough to let us live comfortably, while the rest of the world assumed we were scraping by. We never told a soul. Not neighbors, not family, not even Emily when she was growing up. We drove the same beat-up Ford pickup until the rust finally won. We wore flannel shirts until the elbows wore through. We let people think what they wanted to think. Because real wealth, Anna used to say, isn't measured in bank statements. It's measured in mornings you can wake up without fear, in children who sleep soundly under your roof, in a marriage that survives the hard seasons. Money draws eyes. Eyes bring trouble. Trouble brings danger. So we stayed small on the outside so we could stay safe on the inside. I leaned back in the chair, the wood groaning under me, and thought about Emily. She was 26 now, bright-eyed and kind-hearted. The best parts of her mother wrapped in a stubborn streak she got from me. And lately, she'd brought Evan Brooks into our quiet world. He was charming in that effortless way city people sometimes are. Polished shoes, easy conversation, always asking the right questions at the right moment. He made her laugh in ways I hadn't heard since she was a teenager. She glowed when she talked about him. She talked about a future, a wedding, a life together. And every time she did, that old protective instinct coiled tighter in my chest. I wasn't blind. I'd seen the way Evan's gaze sometimes drifted past the porch railing toward the fields, toward the river, toward the invisible lines he kept asking about. I'd noticed how his compliments about the farm always circled back to its size, its potential, its untapped value. He spoke like a man appraising something he already considered his. I didn't confront him. I didn't warn Emily. Not yet. Confrontation too early gives the predator time to change tactics, to polish the mask even brighter. Better to let him think he was winning. Better to watch. Better to wait until the mask slipped, and I had something solid to show her. Something she couldn't deny or explain away with love or hope. So I stayed silent. Silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. It's the pause before the hammer falls. I'd learned that long ago, on this very land, in harder times than these. Predators feel safest when they believe their prey is oblivious. Let Evan feel safe. Let him talk about helping manage things when I got older. About making sure the farm stays in the family. Let him drop those careful, caring suggestions over Sunday pot roast. Every word he spoke was another thread I was quietly collecting. Another piece of string I'd use to tie the knot when the time came. I looked back at Anna's photograph. In the lamplight, her eyes seemed to understand. She'd always trusted my instincts, even when I couldn't explain them. She'd say, "James, if your gut's talking, you listen. It's kept us alive this long." I nodded to her picture, the way I sometimes did when no one else was around. "I'm listening, sweetheart," I whispered. "I'm listening." Outside, the wind moved through the cottonwoods along the river, a low, steady murmur that sounded almost like a warning. I finished the last of my coffee, cold now, and carried the mug to the sink. Then I turned off the lamp, leaving Anna's photograph in soft shadow. I wasn't going to let anyone take what we'd built, not the land, not the legacy, and most certainly not my daughter. Not while I still had breath to draw and silence left to keep. I couldn't shake the feeling any longer. It had grown from a faint prickle to a steady, insistent pressure behind my ribs, like a wire being slowly tightened. Every time Evan smiled that flawless smile. Every time he asked another seemingly innocent question about the land, the pressure ratcheted up another notch. I needed answers. Real ones. Not guesses, not hunches. Something solid enough to show Emily when the time came. So I called Helen. Helen Whitaker and I had known each other since grade school. She'd gone off to law school while I stayed behind to work the farm with my father. Over the decades, she'd become one of the sharpest, most discreet attorneys in the county, specializing in estates, trusts, and the kind of quiet investigations rich families need when they don't want anyone to know they're asking questions. She never judged. She just delivered facts, clean and cold, the way a surgeon delivers bad news. I met her at the little diner on the edge of town, the one with the cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tastes like it's been reheated since breakfast. We sat in the back corner, away from the regulars. I kept my voice low. "I need you to look into someone," I said. Discreetly. No paper trail that leads back to me. Helen stirred cream into her coffee without looking up. Name? Evan Brooks. He's engaged to Emily. She paused, spoon halfway to her lips, then set it down. How deep? As deep as you can go without tripping alarms. She nodded once. Give me 2 weeks. I'll call when I have something. 2 weeks felt like 2 months. Every day I watched Evan more closely. How he held Emily's hand just a fraction too long when he thought I wasn't looking. How his eyes flicked toward the old barn when we passed it. How he always found a way to steer conversations back to the future of the farm. I kept my face neutral, my answers short. Inside, the wire kept tightening. When Helen finally called, it was late on a Thursday evening. I was in the barn, oiling tools by lantern light. I stepped outside into the cool night air so Emily wouldn't overhear from the house. "James," she said, voice low and careful, the way she spoke when the news wasn't good. "You sitting down?" I leaned against the barn wall. "Just tell me." On the surface, he's immaculate. Ivy League undergrad, finance major, top of his class, MBA from Wharton, steady employment at a mid-tier investment firm in Chicago, clean credit, no arrests, no civil judgments. References check out, former professors, colleagues, even an old roommate who called him dependable to a fault. I exhaled slowly. But I didn't stop at the surface. Helen paused, and I could picture her tapping a pen against her desk the way she always did when she was about to drop something heavy. There are 2 previous engagements. First one, 4 years ago, daughter of a real estate developer in Connecticut. Family worth 8 figures. Engagement lasted 11 months. Ended abruptly after a heated argument over a proposed prenup. She wanted ironclad protections. He pushed back. Hard. Family cut contact. No public fallout. But the girl's mother told a mutual friend it was all about the money from day one. She let that sink in. Second engagement, 2 years ago. Heiress to a regional manufacturing fortune in Ohio. Similar timeline, about a year. Similar pattern. Discussions about trusts, asset division, power of attorney. He wanted more control. She wanted safeguards. Relationship imploded. Again, no lawsuits that went anywhere. Both families were too private, too embarrassed to let it become public. But the pattern is unmistakable, James. He targets women from wealthy families. He plays the long game, charm, patience, perfect boyfriend, until the money conversations start. Then he pushes. When they push back, he walks away clean. No trace, no criminal record. Just smoke. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles ached. The night air felt colder, suddenly. Helen's voice softened. There's no smoking gun here, no fraud convictions, no restraining orders, nothing that would hold up in court yet. But this isn't coincidence. This is a method, a profession. I swallowed. You're saying he's a professional… what? Gold digger? I'm saying he's a professional predator, she answered quietly. He knows exactly how to read people, how to build trust, how to wait, and he knows how to disappear when the game changes. Silence stretched between us. I stared out at the dark fields, the river a faint silver thread under the moon. James, Helen said after a moment, what are you going to do? I don't know yet, I admitted, but I'm not going to sit idle. Be careful. Men like this don't like being cornered. They adapt. Fast. I thanked her, ended the call, and stood there in the dark for a long time. My hands were shaking, not from fear, exactly, but from the cold, hard certainty that had finally settled in my bones. Evan wasn't just suspicious anymore. He had a history, a blueprint, and my daughter was the next name on his list. I walked back to the house slowly, boots crunching on gravel. The kitchen light was still on. Emily was probably reading or scrolling on her phone, waiting for Evan to text goodnight. I paused on the porch steps and looked through the window at her silhouette. Head bent, hair falling across her cheek, completely unaware of the shadow moving closer every day. The report hadn't given me legal proof. Not yet. No judge would issue a warrant based on 2 broken engagements and a gut feeling. But it had given me something far more dangerous. Clarity. The crack in Evan's perfect facade wasn't small anymore. It was wide enough to see straight through to the man underneath, calculating, ruthless, patient. And he was inside my house, figuratively for now, eating at my table, holding my daughter's hand, planning his next move. I opened the screen door quietly and stepped inside. Emily looked up and smiled. Everything okay, Dad? You were out there a while? Just checking on the horses, I lied smoothly. All good. She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her book. I poured myself a glass of water I didn't want, just to have something to do with my hands. My mind was racing. No evidence yet, no proof that would stand up anywhere official. But the psychological pressure inside me was building like steam in a sealed kettle. Every polite word Evan spoke from now on would sound like a threat. Every smile would feel like a blade hidden behind silk. I hadn't told Emily a thing. I couldn't. Not without something concrete. She was in love. Love blinds. I remembered what that felt like with Anna. I wouldn't shatter her world on suspicion alone, but I also wouldn't let a wolf wear sheep's clothing much longer. The wire in my chest tightened another turn. Soon, I knew, it would snap. And when it did, I'd be ready. Evan grew bolder with every passing week, the way ivy creeps up a trellis, slow, steady, almost beautiful, until you realize it's strangling the thing it clings to. Sunday dinners had always been sacred in our house. Anna started the tradition back when Emily was small. Roast chicken or pot roast, mashed potatoes whipped with too much butter, green beans from the garden if they were in season, and always an apple pie that filled the whole kitchen with cinnamon and warmth. Even after Anna was gone, Emily and I kept it going. The table was the same scarred oak one, the chairs mismatched but comfortable, the light soft from the old brass fixture overhead. It was the 1 hour of the week when the world felt simple and safe, until Evan started turning those hours into something else. It began innocently enough, or at least it looked that way. He'd arrive early, sleeves rolled up, offering to carve the meat or carry the heavy Dutch oven from the stove to the table. He'd compliment the food with genuine-sounding enthusiasm, ask me about the best way to season venison, laugh at Emily's stories from work. He fit. That was the problem. He fit too well. Then the suggestions started. The first one came over dessert one Sunday in late November. The pie was still warm. Steam curled up from the slices as Emily passed them around. Evan leaned back in his chair, fork in hand, and looked at me with that calm, concerned expression he'd perfected. "You know, Mr. Harper," he said, voice gentle, almost deferential, "at your age it might make sense to think about putting some things in place, like a power of attorney maybe, just in case. Emily and I could help manage the day-to-day stuff so you don't have to worry about it. I mean, the farm's a big responsibility. We'd make sure everything stays in good hands." He said it like a son-in-law should. Thoughtful, forward-looking, protective. Emily reached over and squeezed his hand, eyes shining with gratitude. "That's sweet, Evan," she murmured. "Dad, he's just looking out for you." I took a slow bite of pie, letting the sweetness sit on my tongue while I studied him across the table. "Appreciate the thought, son," I said evenly. "I'll keep it in mind." He smiled, warm, relieved, perfect. "Of course, no rush. Just something to consider." The second seed came the following week. This time it was about the will. We were clearing plates together in the kitchen. Evan insisted on helping, of course, when he lowered his voice so Emily wouldn't hear from the dining room. "I was reading up on estate planning the other night," he said casually, rinsing a plate under the tap. "A lot of folks your age don't realize how important it is to have everything clearly spelled out, especially with property like this. You wouldn't want any complications down the road. Emily deserves to know the farm will stay hers. And honestly, Mr. Harper, I'd sleep better knowing you're taken care of in your later years." He turned off the faucet and dried his hands on a dish towel, meeting my eyes with earnest concern. "I'd be honored to help you look into it. No pressure. Just want to make sure you're protected." Protected. That word hung in the air between us like smoke. I nodded slowly, wiping my hands. "You're a good man to think of that, Evan. I'll talk to Helen about it. She handles all my legal stuff." His smile widened just a fraction. "Smart. She's the best. Let me know if you need a second opinion. I know a few estate attorneys in the city." I thanked him. I even clapped him on the shoulder as we walked back to the table. Inside, though, something cold and hard was taking shape. He was patient, methodical. Every suggestion was wrapped in care. Every word chosen to sound like love instead of calculation. He never pushed too hard in one sitting. He planted the seed, watered it with concern, then stepped back and let it grow. Classic long-game strategy. I'd seen it before, not with money, but with land disputes, water rights, timber deals. Men who wanted something always started by making you feel like they were doing you a favor. So I started giving him just enough rope. The next Sunday, when he brought up the power of attorney again, this time in front of Emily, I didn't deflect. I leaned forward, elbows on the table, and said, "You know, you're right. I've been meaning to update some things. Maybe we could sit down next week and go over a few papers. Nothing formal, just to get my thoughts in order." Emily's face lit up. "Really, Dad? That would be such a relief." Evan's eyes flickered, only for a second, but I caught it. A spark of satisfaction, quickly masked by humble gratitude. "I'd be happy to help however I can, Mr. Harper. Truly." From then on, I played the part. I let him help review a few old documents, nothing important, Just outdated lease agreements and equipment titles Helen had pulled from the file cabinet and marked up with harmless notes. I nodded thoughtfully when he pointed out potential efficiencies. I even signed a couple of dummy forms she'd prepared, agreements that looked official but carried no legal weight, designed to let him think he was gaining ground. Each time he left the house after one of these sessions, I could almost feel the tension in his shoulders ease. He was relaxing. He was believing the old man was finally coming around, that the farm, and everything under it, was inching closer to his grasp. But every time he spoke, every careful suggestion he made about modernizing the operation or streamlining management for Emily's future, I was listening. Recording. Not just with the small digital recorder I kept in my shirt pocket during our discussions, but in my head. Every word, every inflection, every too-perfect pause. He thought he was the hunter, laying careful traps. He had no idea the trap was already set, and that he was walking straight into it. I smiled when he left each Sunday. I hugged Emily goodnight. I waited. Because patience isn't just a virtue for predators. Sometimes it's the deadliest weapon a father has. I couldn't wait any longer for the mask to slip on its own. Evan was moving too fast now, planting his seeds deeper every Sunday. Every casual conversation, every helpful suggestion about paperwork and powers of attorney. The wire inside my chest had twisted so tight I could barely draw a full breath when he was in the room. I needed proof, something undeniable, something Emily couldn't rationalize away with love or optimism. I needed his real voice, not the polished one he used for us. That's when I called Rachel. Rachel Montoya was a private investigator I'd used once before, back in the late 90s, when a neighbor tried to claim a disputed strip of riverfront based on an old handshake deal. She was small, sharp-eyed, quiet as a shadow, and she didn't waste time with small talk or moral lectures. She asked what I needed, how much I was willing to spend, and how far I wanted her to go. I told her everything. Evan's repeated questions about the property line, the broken engagements Helen had uncovered, the careful way he was maneuvering himself into control of the farm. I told her I suspected he was after more than just Emily's heart. Rachel listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said simply, "I'll need a week, maybe 10 days. Surveillance, background cross-checks, audio if it comes to that. You want recordings? I'll get recordings. But once I start, there's no turning back. You sure?" "I'm sure," I said. She quoted a price, fair, not cheap, and asked for half up front. I wired it that afternoon from the old desktop in the barn office, the one I still used for taxes and feed orders. Then I waited. The days dragged. Evan kept coming around. Dinners, movie nights with Emily, even a Saturday helping me mend fence along the back pasture. Every time he smiled that perfect smile, every time he said, "Mr. Harper," in that respectful tone, I had to fight the urge to confront him right there in the yard. But I didn't. I nodded. I thanked him. I let him think he was winning. Then, one rainy Thursday evening in early December, my phone buzzed while I was washing supper dishes. Emily had gone into town to meet friends. The house was empty except for the patter of rain on the tin roof and the low hum of the refrigerator. The caller ID showed Rachel's number. I dried my hands and stepped out onto the back porch, rain drumming hard on the metal awning overhead. "Got something," she said without preamble. "Audio file. Sent it to your secure email, the one you gave me. Listen when you're alone. And James, brace yourself." I thanked her, ended the call, and went straight to the small office off the living room. The room smelled faintly of old paper and motor oil. I closed the door, sat in the creaky swivel chair, and opened my laptop. The email was already there, subject line blank, except for a single word. Listen. I plugged in headphones so the sound wouldn't carry, clicked the attachment, and pressed play. Static for a second. Then Evan's voice, low, stripped of every ounce of charm I'd grown used to hearing. Cold, flat, calculating. The old man's sitting on millions and doesn't even know what to do with it. The wells are still pumping, quiet as hell. No one suspects a thing. I checked the county records again last week. Nothing's changed. It's all still in his name, but once Emily signs the power of attorney, it's basically ours to manage. After that, a little accident. Slippery barn steps, maybe. Heart attack while he's out fixing fence. Easy. Clean. No one questions an old farmer going down in the line of duty. A second voice, deeper, rougher, laughed once, short and ugly. You're a cold son of a bitch, Brooks. Evan didn't laugh back. I'm practical. She loves me. She'll sign. And when it's done, we split it clean. Half the cash, half the mineral rights. You handle the paperwork through your shell company. I keep the clean face. By spring, we're gone. New names, new city. No trail. The other man, Daniel I assumed, whistled low. You really think she won't suspect? She's in love, Evan said. And there it was. The cruelty laid bare, casual as breathing. People in love don't see what's right in front of them. Trust me. I've done this twice before. Third time's the charm. The recording cut off abruptly. Probably Rachel pulling back before they noticed her. I sat frozen. Headphones still on. The silence louder than the words I'd just heard. My hands shook so badly I had to set them flat on the desk to steady them. I played it again. Then again. Each time the same cold voice, the same matter-of-fact plan to murder me for money I'd never flaunted, never even told my own daughter about. This wasn't a gold digger anymore. This wasn't a con man who'd charm, marry, and disappear with a fat settlement. This was a predator who was willing to kill. The mask I'd suspected was gone. What remained underneath was something monstrous, ruthless, patient, utterly devoid of conscience. He'd planned my death the way another man might plan a weekend fishing trip. Easy. Clean. I pulled the headphones off and leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling beams Anna and I had nailed into place together 40 years ago. My heart hammered, not with fear exactly, but with a white-hot clarity I hadn't felt since the night Anna told me the cancer was back. Suspicion had become certainty. There was no more room for doubt, no more space for, maybe I'm wrong. Evan Brooks wasn't just dangerous, he was lethal. I closed the laptop, stood up slowly, and walked to the kitchen window. Rain streaked the glass. The yard lights cast long, trembling shadows across the gravel drive. Somewhere out there, Evan was probably smiling at Emily, planning his next careful step. He had no idea I'd just heard every word. He had no idea the game had changed. I took a long, steady breath, the kind you take before you sight down a rifle barrel. Then I started planning my countermove, because the hunter had finally shown his teeth. And now it was my turn to bite back. The moment I heard Evan's true voice on that recording, cold, clinical, planning my death like it was just another line item on a spreadsheet, everything changed. I didn't panic. I didn't rage. I didn't run to Emily with tears and accusations. I did what I had always done when the stakes were highest. I went quiet. I went calm. And I started building. The very next morning, I called Helen. Then I called Rachel. We met at a small coffee shop 2 counties over. No one we knew would be there. No familiar faces to notice three people sitting with serious expressions and untouched cups of coffee. I played them the audio file. Neither of them spoke while it ran. When Evan's voice said, "A little accident, easy, clean," Helen's jaw tightened. Rachel's eyes narrowed to slits. When the file ended, there was a long, heavy silence. Finally, Helen spoke, voice low and precise. "This is conspiracy to commit murder, James. Even if he never acts on it, this recording is enough for the authorities to open a file. But if you want real justice, if you want him to feel the full weight of what he tried to do, then we let him dig the hole deeper, much deeper." Rachel nodded slowly. "He thinks he's winning. That gives us the advantage. We feed that belief. We make him comfortable. We make him arrogant. And when he's standing right on the edge of the trap he built for you, we pull the pin." That was the moment the plan was born. From that day forward, I became the perfect, trusting father-in-law. I started inviting Evan over more often. Not just Sunday dinners, weekday evenings too. I asked his opinion on things I'd never asked anyone about before. "Evan, you've got a good head for numbers. What do you think about upgrading the irrigation system next spring?" "Evan, I've been thinking about that power of attorney you mentioned. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time." "Evan, I'm getting older. I don't want to leave Emily with a mess. Would you be willing to help me look over some of the farm documents? I trust you, son. You're family now." Every time I said those words, "I trust you. You're family now." I watched his eyes. A flicker. A quick, satisfied gleam. A predator smelling blood. He bit. Hard. He started coming over with legal pads and spreadsheets. He made suggestions about streamlining management, about bringing in professional oversight, about protecting the long-term value of the mineral rights. He even began talking, carelessly now, because he believed I was already his, about how he'd modernize the operation once he and Emily were officially in charge. I smiled. I nodded. I thanked him. And every single time we worked together, the little digital recorder in my shirt pocket was running. Helen prepared the dummy documents, carefully crafted, beautifully formatted, utterly meaningless pieces of paper. A fake, preliminary management agreement. A phony, intent to transfer limited authority. A beautifully forged addendum to existing trust documentation that looked official, but transferred exactly zero real control. I signed them in front of him. I watched his shoulders relax a little more each time the pen touched paper. I saw the way he started walking taller around the house, the way he began speaking about our farm instead of your farm. He was relaxing. He was getting greedy. He was starting to talk too much. One evening in late January, as snow dusted the fields outside, he leaned back in the office chair, loosened his tie, and, thinking we were completely alone, said something I'll never forget. "Once the power of attorney is finalized, Mr. Harper, I'll take a lot of this off your plate. You won't have to worry about a thing. Emily and I will handle everything. And honestly, after you're gone, we'll be able to really unlock the value here. You've been sitting on a gold mine and living like you're broke. That ends with us." I looked at him over the rim of my coffee mug. I smiled the slowest, warmest, most grandfatherly smile I could manage. "I know you'll take good care of everything, Evan," I said softly. "I trust you completely." He smiled back, wide, victorious, utterly convinced. He never noticed the tiny red light glowing on the recorder in my breast pocket. He never saw Rachel's car parked a quarter-mile down the county road, camera lens trained on the house. He never suspected that every single word he spoke was being collected, time-stamped, duplicated, and stored in 3 separate secure locations. The hunter had become the hunted. The trap was almost finished. All that remained was choosing the perfect moment to spring it. And I already knew exactly when that moment would be. I would let him walk my daughter down the aisle. I would let him stand at the altar in his perfect tuxedo, smiling that perfect smile. I would let 200 guests see the golden boy, the ideal son-in-law, the man who had finally won the family farm and the fortune beneath it. And then, right there, in front of God and everyone, I would pull the pin. He thought he was about to inherit everything. What he didn't know was that the only thing he was about to inherit was a prison sentence. The wedding day arrived on the first Saturday in June, one of those perfect early summer mornings where the sky is so clear it hurts to look at, and the air smells like cut grass and promise. The little white clapboard church on the edge of town had been there since before the Civil War. Simple, unpretentious. The same place Anna and I had stood 40 years earlier, saying vows we kept until death parted us. Today, it was transformed. White roses and ivy twined around every pew, sunlight pouring through the stained glass windows in soft shafts of gold and rose, 200 folding chairs filled with neighbors, old friends, distant cousins, and people who'd known Emily since she was in pigtails riding her first pony. I stood at the back of the church in my best dark suit, the one I'd bought for Anna's funeral and barely worn since, waiting for my daughter. My hands felt strangely empty, without something to hold, so I clasped them behind my back to keep them from shaking. The organist began the processional, a gentle swell of music that made the whole congregation rise. And then the doors at the end of the aisle opened. Emily appeared. She was breathtaking. The white gown flowed around her like water, simple satin with just enough lace at the neckline and sleeves to catch the light. Her hair was swept up with tiny pearl pins, a few loose curls framing her face. She carried a bouquet of white roses and baby's breath, tied with a pale blue ribbon that matched the one Anna had worn on our wedding day. When she saw me, her eyes, those same hazel eyes she'd inherited from her mother, locked on mine and held. She started down the aisle on my arm. Every step felt like it took a lifetime. I could hear the soft rustle of her dress, the quiet creak of the old floorboards, the muffled sniffles from guests who'd known her all her life. Evan waited at the altar in a charcoal tuxedo, posture perfect, smile radiant, hands clasped in front of him like a man who believed he had already won. The minister stood beside him, Bible open, ready to begin. Everything looked exactly as it should, beautiful, traditional, full of hope. But I knew better. Halfway down the aisle, maybe 30 feet from the front, Emily slowed almost imperceptibly. Her fingers tightened on my arm. Then, with the smallest, most deliberate movement, she shifted the bouquet slightly toward me. Her free hand slipped inside the flowers, quick as a shadow, and pressed something small and folded into my palm. She closed my fingers around it before anyone could notice. I glanced down. A tiny scrap of paper, no bigger than a postage stamp, tucked between her thumb and mine. 3 words in her familiar, careful handwriting, the same handwriting that had once left me notes on the fridge when she was in high school. "Dad, help me!" My heart lurched so violently I nearly stumbled. I kept walking, kept smiling for the guests, but inside, everything tilted. I squeezed her hand once, hard, then loosened my grip so no one would see. We reached the front. I lifted her veil with trembling fingers, kissed her cheek, the way tradition demanded, and placed her hand in Evan's. He smiled at me, warm, grateful, victorious. I smiled back. Then I stepped to the side and sat in the first pew, the scrap of paper burning a hole in my closed fist. The ceremony began. The minister spoke of love, commitment, the joining of two families. Evan repeated his vows in a clear, steady voice, every word sounding sincere. Emily stood beside him, head high, face composed. To everyone watching, she looked like a radiant bride. Only I knew the truth. She had heard him. Somehow, maybe a late-night phone call she'd overheard, maybe a careless conversation when she came home early, she had caught the real Evan, the cold one, the one who spoke of accidents and easy and clean. She had carried that knowledge alone for who knew how long, pretending, smiling, planning, waiting for the right moment. Waiting until she could get a message to me without him suspecting. My little girl wasn't passive anymore. She wasn't the trusting, love-blinded daughter I'd feared she'd become. She was fighting back. In the only way she could, in the only place she could, surrounded by 200 witnesses and the man who wanted her father dead. I sat there in the front row, the folded note still clenched in my hand, and felt tears prick my eyes for the first time since Anna's funeral. Not tears of despair, not tears of fear, tears of pride. My daughter had chosen courage over comfort. She had chosen truth over illusion. She had chosen me, chosen us, over the man who had almost convinced her he was the future. The organist paused. The minister asked if anyone knew of any reason the marriage should not proceed. I felt the weight of the moment settle over the church, like a held breath. Emily turned slightly, not toward the minister, not toward Evan, but toward me. Our eyes met again. In that single glance, everything passed between us without a word. I see you. I believe you. We're in this together. I gave her the smallest nod. She exhaled, shoulders dropping just a fraction, as if a terrible weight had finally lifted. Then she faced forward again, and waited. The trap was set. The players were in position, and the only thing left was for the curtain to rise on the final act. In that quiet, sunlit church, with roses and music and the promise of forever hanging in the air, one truth burned brighter than any vow. Family is stronger than any lie. Love, real love, the kind that protects, the kind that fights, will always find a way to break through the darkness. And today, that love had just whispered its battle cry in 3 small words hidden inside a bridal bouquet. Dad, help me. I was ready. We both were. The minister had just asked Evan to repeat the final vow, to love, honor, and cherish, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer. When Emily stopped, she didn't flinch, she didn't whisper. She simply lifted her chin, looked straight at the man standing beside her in his perfect tuxedo, and spoke in a voice that trembled only at the very edges but never broke. I can't do this, she said. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples spread instantly. Soft gasps from the front rows. A low murmur rolling backward through the pews. The organist's fingers freezing mid-note so the last chord hung unfinished in the air. Evan turned to her, smile still in place, but thinner now, uncertain. Emily? Sweetheart, what are you? She cut him off, calm and clear, every word deliberate. Evan, you've been lying to me, to all of us. You only want my father's money. You've planned to hurt him. You've planned to kill him. The church went deathly still. 200 faces turned toward the altar. Neighbors who'd watched Emily grow up, old friends of Anna and me, cousins who'd driven hours to be here, the florist who'd arranged the roses, the baker who'd made the cake waiting back at the farm. Every one of them frozen, breath held, eyes wide. Evan's face drained of color so fast it looked like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Emily, that's insane. You're nervous. Wedding jitters. Let's just... No. Her voice sharpened. I heard you. I heard everything. Talking to Daniel. Talking about power of attorney. Talking about an accident. About how easy it would be once I signed. I heard you say my father's life was just something standing in your way. She reached into the hidden pocket sewn into the side of her gown, the one she'd insisted on when the seamstress asked why, and pulled out a small digital recorder identical to the one I'd been using for weeks. She pressed play. Evan's voice filled the church. Cold, stripped of charm, unmistakable. The old man sitting on millions. A little accident. Slippery barn steps, maybe. Easy. Clean. The recording played for less than 30 seconds. It was enough. A woman in the third row let out a choked sob. Someone else whispered, "My God!" A man near the back stood halfway up, fists clenched. Evan lunged for the recorder. "That's fake! That's edited! She's lying!" But he never finished the sentence. From the back of the church, 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies moved forward. Quiet, unhurried, the way they'd rehearsed it with me and Rachel the week before. Behind them came a plainclothes detective I recognized from the county office. They had cuffs ready. Evan saw them and froze. His eyes darted, first to the deputies, then to the side door, then back to Emily, searching for an escape that no longer existed. "Evan Brooks," the lead deputy said, voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent." The words blurred together as the deputies closed in. Evan twisted, tried to pull away, his polished shoes squeaking on the worn floorboards. "This is ridiculous. I didn't do anything. You can't." He was still shouting denials when the cuffs clicked shut. Daniel, Evan's so-called friend, who'd been sitting in the 5th row pretending to be just another guest, was already on his feet, trying to slip toward the side exit. Rachel, who'd been standing quietly near the vestibule the entire ceremony, stepped into his path with 2 more deputies right behind her. He didn't even try to run. His face had gone gray. He simply raised his hands. The entire arrest took less than 2 minutes. 200 witnesses watched every second of it. Evan's perfect mask shattered completely in front of them all. No more smooth explanations, no more charming deflections, no more careful lies about love and family and the future. Just a man in handcuffs, red-faced, screaming that it was all a misunderstanding, that the recording was doctored, that Emily was hysterical, that I had set him up out of jealousy. No one believed him. I could see it in their faces, the slow shift from shock to disgust, from confusion to certainty. The people who'd shaken his hand an hour earlier at the rehearsal dinner now looked at him like he was something foul they'd stepped in. Whispers turned to murmurs, turned to open voices. I never trusted him completely. Always seemed too good to be true. Poor James. Poor Emily. Emily stood at the altar, bouquet still in her hands, tears streaming down her face, but her back was straight. She didn't collapse. She didn't hide. She looked out at the congregation, then at me, and I saw something fierce and unbroken in her eyes. I stood up from the front pew, walked to her side, and put my arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me, trembling, but not falling. The minister closed his Bible quietly. No one moved to restart the ceremony. There would be no vows today. There would be no kiss. There would be no rice thrown. No first dance. No cake. There would only be justice. Swift, public, undeniable. As the deputies led Evan toward the back doors, he twisted one last time, glaring at me over his shoulder. "You think this is over, old man?" he spat. "You think you've won?" I met his eyes without blinking. "I think you've lost," I said quietly. And everyone here just saw it happen. The doors closed behind him. The church remained silent for a long beat. Then someone began to clap, slow and deliberate. Another joined, then another. Soon the entire congregation was on their feet, applauding, not for celebration, but for truth, for courage, for a father and daughter who had refused to let evil hide behind a smile. Emily turned her face into my shoulder and sobbed once, hard. I held her tighter. "It's over, sweetheart," I whispered. "It's really over." 200 witnesses had seen the truth laid bare in the most public way possible. Evan Brooks could never spin this story again. He could never charm his way out. He could never pretend it was all a misunderstanding. His empire of lies had collapsed in the one place he thought he was safest, in front of God, family, and an entire community that would never forget what they had witnessed. And in that moment, standing there with my daughter in my arms, the weight of 10 long months of silence and suspicion finally lifted. Justice hadn't just been served. It had been seen. And it had been final. The days after the wedding that never happened felt like the hush that follows a thunderstorm. Everything still dripping, the air heavy and clean, the world quieter than it had any right to be. We didn't go back to the reception hall. There was no need. The caterers had already been quietly sent home. The cake sat untouched in the cooler at the farm. Instead, Emily and I drove straight back to the house in silence, the white dress still on her like a ghost she couldn't yet shed. She sat in the passenger seat with her hands folded in her lap, staring out at the passing fields without really seeing them. When we pulled into the gravel drive, she didn't move until I came around and opened her door. She stepped out slowly, as if the ground might give way beneath her. Inside, she went straight to the living room, kicked off her heels, and sank onto the old couch, the same one Anna and I used to sit on during quiet evenings. The dress pooled around her like spilled moonlight. She looked small, fragile, younger than she had in years. I didn't speak at first. I just went to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of water, and brought them back. I set one on the coffee table in front of her and sat beside her, not too close, giving her space to breathe, but close enough that she knew I wasn't going anywhere. She stared at the glass for a long time. Then her shoulders began to shake. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she whispered. The words came out cracked, barely audible. "I'm so sorry. I was so blind. I let him in. I believed him. I almost let him destroy everything. I almost let him hurt you. Because of me." Tears spilled over then, hot, fast, unstoppable. She buried her face in her hands, the veil still pinned in her hair, catching the lamplight like frost. "I should have seen it. I should have known. What kind of daughter am I? What kind of person lets someone like that get so close?" I let her cry. I didn't rush to fix it. I just moved closer, wrapped one arm around her shoulders, and pulled her gently against my side. She resisted for half a second. Pride, maybe, or shame, then collapsed into me the way she used to when she was little, and the world felt too big. I held her, while the sobs came in waves. I didn't say, "It's okay," or "You didn't know." Those words would have been hollow. Instead, when the worst of it had passed and her breathing steadied into uneven hitches, I spoke quietly. "Emily," I said, resting my chin on the top of her head the way I had when she was small, "listen to me. You are not to blame for trusting someone who lied to you with every breath. That's not blindness. That's having a heart, and having a heart is not a flaw. It's the only thing worth protecting." She shook her head against my shoulder. "But I brought him here. I defended him. I ignored every little warning because I wanted to believe in the fairy tale so badly." "I know," I said simply. "And I let you, because I knew you needed to see it for yourself. If I'd come to you with suspicions and half-proofs, you might have pushed me away." Love does that sometimes. It builds walls to protect the dream. I couldn't tear those walls down. Only the truth could. She pulled back just enough to look at me, eyes red-rimmed and searching. You knew? From the beginning?" I nodded slowly. "From the first time he asked about the property line the same way, 4 times in 2 weeks. Then the reports from Helen, the pattern of broken engagements, the way he kept circling back to money, trusts, control. And then the recording. Rachel got it. I heard him plan my death like it was nothing more than moving a chess piece. I knew then. But I waited. I waited until we had something ironclad, something you couldn't explain away, because I wanted you to be able to walk away from him with your eyes wide open, not because your old man told you to." Fresh tears welled up. "Why didn't you just tell me? I would have listened." "Maybe," I said gently. "Maybe not. And either way, you deserve to see the truth yourself. Not because I forced it on you, but because you chose it. That note in the bouquet? That was you choosing. That was you fighting back when it would have been easier to stay quiet and hope. That moment in the church when you stopped the vows and spoke the truth in front of everyone, that was you taking your life back. I'm proud of you, Em. Prouder than I've ever been." She stared at me for a long moment, then let out a shaky laugh that turned into another sob. "I feel so stupid." "You're not stupid," I said firmly. "You're human, and humans make mistakes when they love. The real mistake would have been staying blind after the truth showed itself. You didn't. You stood up. You ended it. That's strength, sweetheart. That's growing up the hardest way there is." We sat like that for a long time, her head on my shoulder, my arm around her, the house quiet except for the occasional creak of settling wood and the distant call of a night bird outside. Eventually she spoke again, voice small. "Will I ever trust anyone again?" I thought about Anna, about the years of quiet trust, the way she'd always known when I was hurting, even if I never said a word. I thought about the farm, about the secret we'd kept to protect what mattered most. "Maybe not the same way," I said honestly, "but you'll learn a different kind of trust. The kind that's earned slowly, tested over time, built on actions instead of words. And you'll know what real love looks like, because you've seen what the fake version costs." She nodded against me. "And no matter what," I added, squeezing her shoulders, "you've got me. You've got this house. You've got the fields and the river and the garden your mother planted. You've got roots that go deeper than any lie can reach. You're never alone in this, Em. Not ever." She lifted her head, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and gave me a small, watery smile, the first real one since the church. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, kiddo." more than anything. We stayed there until the sky outside turned the deep indigo of true night. Eventually she stood, smoothed the wrinkled dress as best she could, and said she was going to change into something normal. I watched her climb the stairs, heard the soft click of her bedroom door. I sat alone for a while longer, staring at the photograph of Anna on the side table. I could almost hear her voice, soft, amused, wise. "Told you she was tough," she'd have said. "Just like her old man." I smiled into the quiet. The storm had passed. The damage was real. Trust had been shattered. Innocence lost. Illusions stripped away. But what remained was stronger for it. A father and daughter who had faced the worst together and come out the other side still holding on. Growing up hurts sometimes. Trust can break. But family, the real kind, doesn't. And ours was still here. Whole, quiet, safe. The courtroom in the county seat was small and plain, nothing like the dramatic marble halls you see in movies, just worn wooden benches, a faded American flag behind the judge's bench, and the low hum of an old air conditioning unit that never quite cooled the room. Evan Brooks stood there in an ill-fitting orange jumpsuit. Hands cuffed in front, head bowed for the first time since I'd known him. No perfect hair, no polished smile, no confident posture. Just a man who had finally run out of masks. The judge read the sentence slowly, every word measured and final. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, 20 years. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 35 years. Sentences to run consecutively. Evan didn't look up. Daniel, standing beside him, received a similar term, 25 years. The gavel came down once, sharp and clean. That was it. No appeals that would change anything soon. No dramatic last-minute confession. Just the quiet, irreversible closing of a chapter that had almost ended in blood. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel hatred. I felt relief. The kind that settles deep in your bones after you've carried a weight for too long. Emily sat beside me through the whole hearing, gripping my hand so tightly her knuckles went white. When the judge finished, she exhaled a long, trembling breath and leaned her head against my shoulder. We didn't speak until we were outside in the parking lot, the late summer sun warm on our faces. "It's really over," she said softly. "It's really over," I answered. She healed slowly after that, not in a straight line, the way we'd all like, but in fits and starts, the way real healing usually happens. Some mornings she woke up quiet, eyes distant, replaying every moment she'd missed. Other days she laughed at something small, a joke on the radio, the way the horses nickered when she brought them apples, and the sound felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. She started riding again, long, slow rides along the river trail at dawn, coming back with cheeks flushed and hair tangled from the wind. She helped me in the fields more, planting winter wheat, mending fence, learning the rhythm of the land the way Anna and I once had. She didn't talk about Evan much anymore. When she did, it was without the old tremor in her voice, just facts, just lessons learned. One crisp spring morning the following year, I took her to the garden. Anna's garden had always been tucked behind the house, protected by a low stone wall my grandfather built. It wasn't big, maybe 30 by 40 feet, but it had been her sanctuary. Roses, lavender, peonies, herbs that perfumed the air when you brushed past them. After she passed, I'd kept it up out of habit, but it had grown a little wild, a little overgrown. That spring, I decided it was time to bring it back properly. Emily and I worked side by side for weeks, We turned fresh compost into the beds, planted new rose bushes, reds and pinks and creams, the way Anna liked them. We added more lavender because the bees loved it, and the scent reminded me of her laugh. We rebuilt the trellis for the climbing clematis, strung new wire for the sweet peas. Every evening we came in dirty, tired, smelling of earth and green things, and sat on the porch with cold glasses of iced tea, watching the sun drop behind the river. One afternoon, as we knelt together planting the last row of tulip bulbs, I straightened up, wiped my forehead with the back of my arm, and looked at her. "Em," I said, "I want you to remember something." She brushed dirt from her hands and sat back on her heels, waiting. "Real wealth," I told her, "isn't about how much you own. It's not the size of the bank account, or the number of acres, or even the oil that's been quietly pumping under our feet all these years. Real wealth is what you're willing to protect, and who you're willing to protect it for." She looked at me for a long moment, eyes steady. "You protected me," she said quietly, "even when I couldn't see the danger, even when I thought you were being stubborn or old-fashioned. You stayed silent. You waited. You built the trap instead of rushing in and breaking my heart before it needed to be broken. That's what wealth looks like to me now." I reached out and touched her cheek, smudging a little dirt there without meaning to. She didn't wipe it away. "And you protected me right back," I said. "That note in the bouquet, that moment in the church, you chose truth over the easy path. That's the kind of rich no one can ever take away." She smiled, small, real, the kind that reaches the eyes, and nodded. We finished planting in companionable silence. When the last bulb was in the ground and the beds were mulched, we stood together looking at the garden. It wasn't perfect yet. Flowers take time, but the promise was there. New growth, new color, new life pushing up through the dark soil. The farm is still here, quiet, simple, safe. The old trucks still sit in the drive, rusting in the same places. The house still creaks in the wind. The river still runs slow and steady toward wherever rivers go. Beneath it all, the wells still produce their modest share. Enough to keep us comfortable without ever making us flashy. We still live plainly. We still wear work boots. We still let people assume what they want to assume. Because the things worth protecting, the garden, the family, the trust between a father and daughter, don't need to be shouted from rooftops. They just need to be tended, day after day, season after season. Emily and I walk the property line sometimes now, not to measure it, not to map it, but just to feel it under our feet. We talk about Anna. We talk about the future. We talk about nothing at all. And that's okay too. And every spring, when the first roses bloom in Anna's garden, their scent drifting across the yard on the warm breeze, I think the same thing. This quiet, stubborn, hard-won life is the only kind of rich that really matters. The rest is just noise.